Our hot topic here on Wednesday morning on Morning Kick Around. The January camp roster is out. We've had a chance to look at it. We kind of want to ask the question, how many of the players included here in the January camp have a realistic shot in joining the number 1A real deal national team when it comes time for that?
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair way to look at this. I mean, why are you doing this if you're not trying to find players that might be in your first team picture in the future? Now, the difference here from a normal January camp or the average January camp, Rob, I guess, is that we are 16 months, something like that, away from the naming of a roster for a World Cup team for the U.S. men's national team in a home World Cup on American soil for the most part. So there is this extra level of paying attention to this, right? Okay, wait. Who is the now? If we went through who we project to make the World Cup roster, are there any spots open? Like, can you think of a spot? It's like, okay, well, is Christopher Lund locked in as a left back replacement for Jedi Robinson if Robinson can't play? Is your backup left back Christopher Lund and we're done with that? Or does John Tolkien, who immediately jumps off of this page because he's been good in MLS, because he just helped his team make a run to an MLS Cup final, and because it seems as though he has a European future, although things are very quiet on the potential January move for John Tolkien at the moment. And maybe when we have Tom Bogert on the show on Friday, we can ask him about John Tolkien and his European future. But that's one guy, right? So again, you have to think about this not just as, is this player talented? Is he a potential? Like Diego Luna, whose picture we have right here on this graphic made by MLS with the January roster. Everybody likes watching Diego Luna play.
Yeah, for sure. Very fun.
He's done some great stuff in Major League Soccer. He feels like a little bit of a luxury player in a national team setup because I'm not sure the defensive work is up to that standard. And by the way, this is also a question for some other players who are maybe more in the first team picture. Gio Reyna, who can't get on the field when Julian Brandt is healthy at Dortmund. I guess that's a question for him. But that's my point, though, is if Gio Reyna is healthy, is Diego Luna a national team player? Do we have an answer to that? Probably he's not, right? Probably he's not.
I would classify that as to be determined. And as you were throwing around the name Gio Reyna, what would your reaction been if Gio Reyna appeared on this January roster?
Oh, that would be incredible. That would be, I mean, it would certainly make it a lot more interesting as a roster. I mean, it would say a lot about Dortmund if they were releasing him for this roster. No, he's in the team.
His stock would just like crash, right?
Well, he's in the team. He dresses. I don't think it's that Sahin doesn't see value in Gio Reyna. It's that he is just not the first choice guy. But we as national team fans are chomping at the bit for Gio to get a consistent run of first team minutes so that we can measure him up, so we can see. And obviously we want him to, we know that Gio Reyna is a talented player. Like, he's shown enough that we're not like, oh, well, he's still growing as a player. And I don't really see it yet. No, we've seen it. It's just that he can't get the runway for us to go, okay, he's up to speed now. And when we get the national team together for meaningful games, and we've got Nations League coming up. I mean, I don't know what that's going to look like exactly, but that's the only thing that, the only thing we really have to measure this national team by over the next year and a half are things like Nations League and Gold Cup. So when you look at players like Luna, you have to consider who's in front of him. And obviously, again, that's a little bit more complicated when you've got a Gio Reyna who's not playing consistent minutes. But there are some players here. It's like, oh, is that a nice player? Do I think he's talented? Sure. Brian Gutierrez. Can I imagine Brian Gutierrez getting into the first 23 or 25 for the U.S. men's national team right now? No, I can't. Can I imagine it in a year and a half? Still no. Like, still, I just don't. There's not a spot, right? There's nobody like, well, we're going to cycle out that midfielder or that forward, and Brian Gutierrez is going to be the guy to step in. And I think part of that too is that these are all MLS-based players, and it's almost like instead of thinking about, is that player good enough for the national team, or do they have the potential to break into the national team picture? It's, will they be in Europe by 2026? And will they have enough enough minutes under their belt in Europe to have shown that they're the quality that would be Mauricio Pochettino's preference for a World Cup team in 2026.
You mentioned.
Go ahead.
I was saying, you mentioned earlier about like taking a 26-year-old into this camp rather than a promising 22-year-old, and what's the more what benefits the squad more? And I was thinking maybe Pochettino, he's only got maybe he's only planning to be here through 2026, and he's looking for results now, guy. So in his mind, someone with a couple more years and a little bit more professional experience might mean more to him. Come less than 18 months until the World Cup.
Yeah, I think there are lots of different motivations for Poach, and he's getting paid the money to figure it out. So he's got to create some depth in his squad or in his player pool, which is like regardless of what I think about any of these players breaking into a first team national team right now, it doesn't hurt. It's not a bad idea to have a look at players so that you have some information to go on if you are suddenly down to your sixth choice center back, right? If you need to call that guy in because two guys have gotten hurt, now you need somebody in. Well, is that Miles Robinson? Is it Walker Zimmerman? Is it Jalen Neal? Is it George Campbell? These players will get a look so that Poach will have that information. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I do also think that the culture of the team is important. And even if Pulisic and McKennie and all of those guys, Gio Reyna, even if they're not with this group, they're certainly aware. It's the same flag. It's the same organization. It's the same team. It's the same coach. So I do think it matters on some level if Pochettino can get victories against Venezuela and Costa Rica. By the way, Costa Rica with a brand new manager. That's going to be fascinating when they show up to play the United States, because Miguel Herrera has just been named Costa Rica's new manager, new head coach. So that'll
be interesting.
That is interesting.
That'll add a little flavor to that.
Yeah, look, I think I can be like, hey, good for these guys. I'm glad they're getting recognition. There's something to that. I just don't know that outside of a Tolkien and maybe a Schulte, I'm not looking at that group going, here's a guy I could see. And now there will be surprises in 26. I'm just not sure that any of these guys are going to be those surprises.
So the broad answer to that is not many of these guys come into the mix. But last note before we move on from January camp roster discussion, which one of these position groups is the better and which one is concerning, that shows like, where our national team or our domestic based player pool is at?
Well, we remain in a situation where there are no top MLS goal scorers that are American. Brian White, I think, has been the leading American goal scorer for a couple of years now. Now that Jossie Zardes' career is on the downswing, there just aren't a lot of top level goal scorers. Luna's getting his share of goals, but not as a center forward. I guess I'm talking about center forwards more than anything else. So I guess you could throw Luna into that mix as an example of a player who can find goals as an American. Center back. I mean, look, let's just be honest about the center back situation. The fact that you're calling in Ream, Robinson, and Zimmerman, and all of those guys have been in the national team picture, are well-known commodities, are, in the case of Ream, on the very back end of his career. And if you had your druthers, you would like to replace him with somebody just as good who is 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, even younger. And that's Neal and Campbell. And I'll throw this in here from Mateo. No shade, but I've never even heard of George Campbell. What's his level? He is right now an above average MLS center back, right? But he's not as good as Jackson Reagan, who didn't get called in, but again is 26. Jalen Neal is somebody everybody thinks of as talented, but doesn't have enough sort of resume for us to go, yep, that's a guy that we imagine might be in the national team picture in the years to come. I mean, Jalen Neal's only 21. I think it's worth pointing out. He's only 21. He kind of popped up and got a chance with the Galaxy at a young age. So let's not give up on him. Like, we shouldn't give up on anybody who's in that age range. But nobody at this point is showing us that they are ready for prime time. And that's probably a good thing on some level, in the sense that our best players are in Europe, right? And you know, whatever you think of Chris Richards and how it's going at Palace, he's still, you know, he's still playing at a higher level than anybody else in this group. So he should be in the national team picture as long as he's getting minutes with Crystal Palace in the English Premier League. There you go. This is actually a good shout. Jesus Ferreira, probably the best American goal scorer from a forward position in that group, and he is in that group. But he's not a player that anybody wants to see in the national team picture when we call up a team to play meaningful games against top-level opposition. No.
We'll see what happens. January games come across our screens on January 18th and January 22nd. We'll see if any of those players we see later in the month have any impact when we get to was it Nations League qualifying or Nations League finals and the Gold Cup. The Gold Cup is a thing in the summer of 2025. Hit that subscribe button to Morning Kick Around. The YouTube is on the drive, the fight for 500, and we creep ever closer with each click. Be careful when you smash the screens. I don't know how many replacements you have, but I hear you're supposed to smash that button. We're going to come right back in just 1 second with today's big question.